Hello and welcome to Psycho Killer, the podcast about Britain's most evil criminals. And today we've had news of another one of those, a man called David Fuller, a 67-year-old electrician who thought he'd gotten away with the murders of two young women 34 years ago. He's now facing the rest of his life in jail after new DNA techniques finally identified him. And in a shocking discovery, after his arrest last December, it's now been revealed that police found that Fuller had for years, indeed decades, been sexually assaulting dozens of female corpses in the mortuary of the hospital where he was employed. Jacques Morrell, what's your immediate reaction to this story?
My immediate reaction is taking me back to a case from the early 80s that I had the privilege of working on, and that was another unsolved murder. In fact, it's one we're going to feature in a future episode. And it involved familial DNA. And looking at this David Fuller case, I mean, taking aside the absolute revulsion of his actions after the two murders when he's gone on to necrophilia. It's the initial cases that have brought him his arrest about, and those little bits of luck that are needed on these old cases to find these people after, 2-3 decades.
Jack, just how accurate is DNA testing nowadays?
Well, it's increasingly accurate, but what the scientists can't guarantee is the quality of the exhibit that they're working on. Some exhibits may have degraded over time. The early testing on them may have compromised their integrity, if that makes sense. I think reading this case, it looks like they've managed to do some more testing. They had DNA in 1999, and they've done some further testing with advanced DNA analysis, where they've started to look into the familial aspect. So, it's sort of preserving and re-looking at these cases that have brought it about. And then obviously they've worked on the familial aspect and found him, a little bit like the Golden State Killer in the United States, but obviously this one has come about through the National DNA Database for the legally processed DNA from arrested people in the UK.
David Fuller murdered two women in Kent in 1987, Wendy-knell and Caroline Pierce. Now, Wendy-knell was the manager of a Super Snaps shop, indeed the local branch where David Fuller took his photographs to be developed back in the days before digital photography. Do you think that perhaps Wendy-knell saw some disturbing images and was going to inform the authorities and was therefore murdered to secure her silence?
It's difficult to say, probably unlikely in the fact that back in those days when photographs were developed, they were often developed and produced at a lab away from the actual shop premises. I do have cases where concern has been raised about photographs and they've been reported to the police back in those days. But as I say, there's more than one person that would come across them, and there was a process for how they deal with it. So I think the second girl that it looks like Fuller has killed was a waitress, I believe. Yeah, and I think those two cases are the ones that have led to his arrest, but it's what he's then gone on to do, and maybe he knew that he'd left evidence and was likely to be caught from those abductions and murders, and he's inexplicably gone on to necrophilia, where obviously his victims are already there for him and no risk of an abduction.
The police say the extent of David Fuller's offending is unprecedented. How do you go about informing the relatives of all of the families who will have been affected by his vile behaviour over the past 3 decades?
Well, it's a mammoth task, and clearly when they approach family, they need to be sure of where they stand. So however they've dated the videos and the photographs that it appears he's taken, identifying the location, they knew where he worked, so they could go through the records, I suppose, of everybody who's been through that mortuary. And then when they're pretty sure, where they are with identifying the bodies involved, they've then got the task of tracing family. Are they going to be all over the country, if not the world, aren't they? And, they would need, officers locally to manage that for them. But there's such a lot of work that would have gone on covertly, in the sense that, they wouldn't have revealed the scale of this investigation and kept it as tight as possible.
Fuller's hospital victims ranged from a girl aged just 9 to the body of a 100-year-old woman. How did he manage to get away with it for so long, do you think?
We've touched on other cases in the past, haven't we, Simon, where it seems odd to most of us how somebody can operate in a family unit, with a partner, with a child growing up, how their behaviour or their propensity to their sort of deviant tendencies or whatever just don't get revealed. And I guess, you never know what's going on behind closed doors. And I've seen and been to places before where, you think, how on earth do the family not know or suspect of the individual's activities? In some cases, they don't. Some people live almost private lives within the family unit. It's very hard to comprehend.
When you look at a photograph of David Fuller, he just looks like a frail old man, in much the same way as D'Angelo looked like a frail old man when he appeared in court in California. Do we need to reappraise our vision of a psycho killer? It's not necessarily a monster, it's somebody who could just as easily be sitting next to us on the bus.
Well, exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. We, you never know. And even talking to people, I mean, this individual, worked for a hospital for years and years at several hospitals. There's some... They would be, as an individual, he would have been exposed, his personality would have been exposed and known to other members of staff. And yet, he clearly came across as a diligent or a reliable employee, and was left to get on with his job, and was clearly trusted to get on with his job.
Do you think David Fuller's employers have some questions to answer?
Oh, without a doubt, and they'll already been trying to ask those questions, and whatever review may come out of this. But again, it's another of our public services who are, again, unfortunately, exposed to the embarrassment and the shock, really, of having a prolific offender committing crimes on the premises.
Fuller has admitted these atrocious offences. He's yet to be sentenced. How do you think he'd fare in prison?
Well, that whole risk management would be, would be managed to ensure that he is his vulnerabilities and the likelihood of retribution are reduced. He should expect, the same level of protection and management as a prisoner as any other. So again, that's another task for the prison service to manage.
Jack, as always, thanks for your insight. This is Psycho Killer, the shocking British true crime podcast.